They called him the King of Wall Street, a man who could buy countries with a signature. She was just the girl refilling his water glass, invisible, dismissed, and drowning in debt. He thought it was a joke. He threw a crumpled, ancient document onto the table and laughed, promising $10 million to anyone who could decode it, convinced it was impossible. He didn't know that the trembling waitress standing behind him held a secret that would bring his entire empire to its knees. Watch carefully, because what happens in the next few minutes proves that sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the only one worth listening to. The air inside the obsidian room didn't smell like food. It smelled of power, old leather, and cologne that cost more than Audrey Hale's entire yearly tuition. Perched on the 55th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park, the restaurant was a sanctuary for New York's untouchables. Audrey adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform. Her feet throbbed. She was 6 hours into a double shift, and the blister on her left heel felt like a burning coal, but she kept her face blank, her eyes lowered. Rule number 1 of the obsidian room: staff are furniture. You move when needed. You disappear when not. More scotch, now. The voice was low, raspy, and accustomed to immediate obedience. Audrey moved instantly, picking up the crystal decanter. The man speaking was Harrison Blackwood. Even if you didn't follow the stock market, you knew Harrison Blackwood. At 32, he was the youngest CEO in the history of the Blackwood conglomerate, a shark in a bespoke Italian suit who had recently acquired a massive lithium mining operation in South America. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with eyes that looked like shattered ice and a jawline that could cut glass. Tonight, however, Harrison looked stressed. He was seated at the private corner table, the one shielded by soundproof glass panels. Surrounding him were 3 men: his lawyer, Arthur Banks, his chief of operations, a sweaty man named Miller, and a woman Audrey didn't recognize who scrolled disinterestedly on her phone. "I'm telling you, Harrison, the contract is solid," Banks said, nursing a martini. "The Peruvian government signed off. The locals are pacified. The land is yours." "Then why?" Harrison slammed a heavy, leather-bound folder onto the table, making the silverware rattle. "Did I receive this in the mail this morning?" "No return address. Just this gibberish." Audrey poured the scotch, her hand steady. She tried not to look, but her eyes caught the document spilling out of the folder. It wasn't a standard legal briefing. It was a piece of parchment, yellowed and brittle, covered in frantic, hand-scrawled symbols. Most people would see scratches. Audrey saw syntax. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She paused, just for a fraction of a second, the decanter hovering over the glass. "Girl," Harrison snapped, not even looking at her face. "You're hovering. Pour or leave." "Apologies, sir," Audrey whispered. She finished the pour and stepped back into the shadows, clutching her serving tray against her chest like a shield. She should have walked away. She should have gone to the kitchen, grabbed a bread basket for table 4, and forgotten what she saw. But she couldn't. Audrey Hale wasn't just a waitress. Before her mother got sick, before the hospital bills piled up like snowdrifts and forced her to drop out of Columbia University, Audrey had been the top doctoral candidate in linguistic anthropology. Her specialty wasn't just languages, it was dead languages, dialects lost to time and colonization. From her spot by the service station, she watched Harrison pick up the parchment again. "It looks like a child drew it," Miller laughed nervously. "Probably a prank from one of the competitors. Maybe Sebastian Cole is trying to spook you." "It's not a prank," Harrison muttered, rubbing his temples. "I had my team run it through every translation software in the valley. Google, DeepL, military-grade decryption. Nothing. It's a mix of Spanish and something else. Something archaic. Burn it." the woman at the table said, finally looking up. "Focus on the merger, Harrison. You're paranoid. I'm not paranoid, Jessica. I'm thorough." Harrison's voice rose, silencing the nearby tables for a moment. He took a long swig of the scotch. The alcohol was hitting him now. He held the paper up to the light, sneering at it. "Look at this trash," he announced, his voice booming with the reckless arrogance of the ultra-wealthy. "I have $1 billion deal closing on Friday, and I'm losing sleep over scribbles." He stood up, swaying slightly, and waved the paper in the air. The restaurant went quiet. Everyone watched the spectacle. "I'll tell you what," Harrison announced, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "I'll give $10 million, right now, a check on the table, to anyone who can tell me what this says. $10 million to translate this garbage." His table erupted in sycophantic laughter. Miller slapped the table. "Good one, boss. Maybe the busboy knows ancient Peruvian." "$10 million!" Harrison shouted again, enjoying the attention. He tossed the paper onto the center of the table like a piece of trash. "But nobody can, because it's nonsense, just like the threats against this deal." Audrey stood frozen. $10 million. It was a joke to him. Pocket change. But to her? It was her mother's heart surgery. It was her tuition. It was a life where she didn't have to count pennies to buy ramen noodles. She looked at the paper again. She knew those symbols. She knew the curvature of the script. It wasn't nonsense. It was Quechua, but a specific, localized dialect from the highlands of the Andes, mixed with a colonial cipher used by Jesuit missionaries in the 1700s to hide records from the Spanish crown. It was rare. It was complex. And she was one of perhaps 5 people in North America who could read it. Her hands shook. "Don't do it," a voice in her head screamed. "He's drunk. He's mocking you. You'll get fired." But then she thought of the eviction notice on her kitchen counter. Audrey took a breath. She stepped out of the shadows. The click of her sensible work shoes on the marble floor sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. Audrey walked up to the table. She didn't look at Miller, or the lawyer, or the woman. She looked directly at Harrison Blackwood. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. Harrison blinked, looking down at her, as if a napkin had suddenly started speaking. He frowned, his eyes trying to focus on her face. "What? Did I ask for the check?" "No, sir," Audrey said. Her voice trembled, but she forced it to steady. "You asked for a translator." Silence descended on the table. Heavy, thick silence. Then Miller burst out laughing, a wet, ugly sound. "Oh, this is rich. The waitress wants a crack at it. Go ahead, sweetheart. Tell us what it says. Does it say, 'Tips are included'?" The lawyer, Arthur Banks, smirked. "Harrison, sit down. Let the girl get back to work." But Harrison didn't sit. He stared at Audrey. He saw the fraying collar of her uniform, the dark circles under her eyes, the cheap watch on her wrist. He saw someone he considered beneath notice. But he also saw something in her eyes, a terrifying, quiet intelligence that unsettled him. "You think you can read this?" Harrison asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I don't think," Audrey said. "I know." Harrison leaned back, crossing his arms. He looked like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. "Okay. Humor me. If you're wrong, you're fired. Not just from here. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." "Harrison, don't be cruel," the woman, Jessica, said lazily. "No." Harrison held up a hand. "She stepped into the arena. Let's see if she can fight." He pointed to the paper. "Read it." Audrey reached out. Her fingers brushed the parchment. The texture was rough. She didn't pick it up. She simply leaned over, scanning the lines. The cipher was tricky. It used substitution based on the lunar calendar of the Incan Empire. But she had written her master's thesis on exactly this type of syncretic coding. She took a deep breath. "It's a warning," she said. Harrison's smirk faltered slightly. "A warning?" "Generic. Fortune cookies have warnings. Be specific." "It's addressed to the Wolf of the North," Audrey continued, her eyes darting across the lines. "That's you. In the local dialect, Atok." "Wolf?" Harrison went still. He had never told anyone that the locals called him that during his site visits. He glanced at his lawyer. Banks looked suddenly pale. "Go on," Harrison commanded. The drunkenness had vanished from his tone. "It says," Audrey paused, untangling a complex knot of verbs. "It says, the earth you seek to buy is hollow. The salt is poison. But the wolf does not see the trap, for the serpent at his right hand has blinded him." She looked up. "The serpent at his right hand," Audrey repeated. Miller, the chief of operations, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "This is garbage. She's making it up. She probably Googled you, Harrison." "Shut up, Miller," Harrison snapped. He looked at Audrey with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Keep reading. What else?" "There is a signature," Audrey said. She pointed to a glyph at the bottom that looked like a twisted tree. "It's not a name. It's a lineage marker. It belongs to the elder of the Quero people. But there's a postscript, written in a different hand, a modern hand." "What does it say?" Harrison demanded. He was leaning in now, his face inches from hers. "It translates to, check the geological survey dated November 14th, Section 4, Paragraph 2. The yield numbers were falsified." The sound of a glass shattering broke the spell. Arthur Banks, the lawyer, had dropped his martini. The olive rolled across the table, leaving a trail of gin. Audrey looked at the lawyer. His face was the color of ash. "November 14th, Harrison repeated slowly. He turned his head, his movement mechanical, predator-like, toward his lawyer. "Arthur, that was the day you flew down to Lima personally to verify the soil samples." "Harrison, she's lying," Arthur stammered, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "She's a plant. Sebastian Cole sent her. How could a waitress know about the November 14th report? That's classified internal data." "Exactly," Harrison said softly. "It's classified. So how does the document know about it, unless the document is real?" Harrison looked back at Audrey. The mockery was gone. In its place was a look of awe and something else, fear. He realized that this girl, this invisible servant, had just handed him the key to a conspiracy that was about to cost him billions. "Section 4, Harrison whispered. "You falsified the yield numbers, Arthur? The mine is empty?" "It's not empty!" Arthur yelled, panic taking over. "It's just less than projected. Harrison, listen to me." "Get out," Harrison said. "Harrison, get out before I kill you right here," Harrison roared. Arthur Banks scrambled back, grabbed his briefcase, and ran out of the restaurant, nearly knocking over a busboy. Miller and Jessica sat frozen, terrified to breathe. Harrison stood there, chest heaving. He slowly turned his gaze back to Audrey. She was standing with her hands clasped, looking at the floor again, trying to shrink back into invisibility. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a checkbook. The room watched in stunned silence as he uncapped a gold fountain pen. He wrote furiously, ripped the check out, and slammed it onto the table. "I'm a man of my word," Harrison said, his voice rough. Audrey looked at the check. It was made out to cash. $10 million. I can't take this, sir," Audrey whispered. "You just saved me $2 billion and stopped me from walking into a federal fraud investigation," Harrison said. "Take the damn money." "No." Audrey stepped back. Harrison looked baffled. "No. Are you insane? Do you know how many years you have to serve drinks to make this?" "I didn't do it for the money," Audrey said, her pride flaring up, overriding her fear. "I did it because I hate seeing people being lied to, even people like you." She turned around and walked toward the kitchen. "Wait!" Harrison called out. She didn't stop. She pushed through the swinging doors, her heart beating so fast she thought she might faint. She needed to get out. She needed air. She needed to escape before the reality of what just happened crashed down on her. But the story wasn't over. As Audrey grabbed her coat from the locker room, fleeing the restaurant through the back alley, she didn't notice the black SUV idling at the corner. She didn't notice the man in the passenger seat, Arthur Banks, watching her through the tinted window, holding a phone to his ear. "She read it," Arthur hissed into the phone. "The waitress, she knows the code. You have to take care of her. Tonight." Audrey ran. The cold New York wind bit through her thin coat, but she couldn't feel it. Her mind was a whirlwind of adrenaline and regret. Why didn't you take the check? The practical side of her brain screamed. You could have paid for Grandma's care. You could have disappeared. But it wasn't just pride. It was fear. Taking that money would have bound her to Harrison Blackwood, and men like him didn't give gifts without strings attached. She ducked into the subway station at 59th Street, swiping her Metro card with shaking hands. Insufficient fare. "Damn it," she sobbed, fumbling for loose change. "Allow me." A hand reached over her shoulder, tapping a platinum card against the reader. The turnstile beeped green. Audrey spun around. Harrison Blackwood stood there. He wasn't wearing his coat. He was still in his suit, looking wildly out of place amidst the grime and graffiti of the subway station. He was out of breath. "You run fast," he said, staring at her. "Leave me alone." Audrey backed away, moving through the turnstile. Harrison vaulted over the turnstile, ignoring the bewildered shout of the station attendant. He caught up to her on the platform. "I'm not here to hurt you," Harrison said, raising his hands. I don't even know your name." "Audrey," she said, clutching her bag. "My name is Audrey. Audrey. Look, I apologized for how I acted upstairs. I was under a lot of pressure." "You were a jerk," Audrey corrected him. Harrison let out a short, surprised laugh. "Yeah, I was. I am. Look, why didn't you take the money?" "Because I don't want your charity," Audrey snapped. "And I don't want to be involved in your wars." "That document? The postscript wasn't just about yield numbers, Mr. Blackwood. It used a specific idiom. The poisoned well flows both ways." Harrison frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the sabotage isn't just in Peru," Audrey said, her voice dropping. The platform was empty, except for a homeless man sleeping on a bench further down. The dialect used in that letter. It's Quero, yes. But the syntax. It's academic. It's the way a Westerner would write Quero. Someone learned. Harrison stepped closer, his intensity returning. "Someone like who?" "My father," Audrey whispered, the admission tearing out of her. Harrison froze. "Your father? Who is your father?" "Professor Robert Hale. He was the leading expert on Andean linguistics at Columbia. He disappeared 5 years ago. Everyone said he died in a climbing accident in the Andes." "And you think he wrote this?" "I know he did," Audrey said, tears pricking her eyes. "He had a habit of crossing his T's with a double slash. The document has it. He's alive, Mr. Blackwood, and he's trying to warn you." Harrison looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the resemblance now, the intelligence, the intensity. "If he's alive," Harrison said slowly, "then Arthur Banks didn't just falsify numbers. He made your father disappear to keep the secret." Before Audrey could respond, a screech of tires echoed from the street level above. Heavy footsteps came thundering down the subway stairs. Harrison looked up. He saw 3 men in dark coats descending rapidly. They weren't police. They held their hands inside their jackets. "Arthur moves fast," Harrison muttered. He grabbed Audrey's hand. "Run!" "What?" "Run!" Harrison pulled her toward the dark end of the platform, away from the exit. "Into the tunnel!" "We can't go in the tunnel! The 3rd rail!" Audrey screamed. "It's that or a bullet!" Harrison yelled. He dragged her off the platform edge, down onto the tracks, just as the first shot rang out. The bullet sparked against the steel pillar where Audrey's head had been a second ago. They scrambled into the darkness of the subway tunnel, the smell of ozone and rat poison filling their lungs. Behind them, the footsteps hit the gravel. The hunt was on. "Keep moving!" Harrison gasped, pulling her deeper into the dark. "If we get out of this alive, Audrey, I'm not giving you $10 million. "Good," she yelled back, stumbling over a railroad tie. "I'm giving you half the company," he shouted, "because you're the only person in my life who isn't trying to kill me." The subway tunnel was a throat of darkness, swallowing them whole. The air was thick with the metallic tang of grinding steel and the damp, rot scent of standing water. Harrison Blackwood, a man whose shoes were Italian leather and cost more than a Honda Civic, slipped on a patch of oily slime. He went down hard, his knee cracking against a wooden railway tie. "Get up!" Audrey hissed, grabbing his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "They're coming!" Behind them, the beam of a flashlight sliced through the gloom, bouncing off the wet walls. "Mr. Blackwood!" a voice echoed. Gruff, professional, lethal. "Stop running. Mr. Banks just wants to talk." "Talk!" Harrison spat, grimacing as he hauled himself up. "Arthur Banks doesn't talk. He negotiates plea deals or he buries evidence. Right now, I'm the evidence." They scrambled deeper into the tunnel. Audrey led the way, her eyes adjusting to the dark faster than his. She wasn't navigating by sight, but by memory and instinct. She knew the city's skeleton. She knew that the maintenance alcoves appeared every 100 yards on the left. "Here," she whispered, shoving him into a cutout in the concrete wall, hidden behind a rusted electrical box. They pressed themselves into the small, dirty space. Harrison was breathing hard, his chest heaving against hers. The proximity was sudden and overwhelming. In the restaurant, she had been a servant, a background fixture. Here in the dark, she was the only thing keeping him alive. He could smell her, not expensive perfume, but something real. Vanilla soap and rain. "Quiet," she breathed, her hand hovering near his mouth. The footsteps crunched on the gravel, getting closer. The flashlight beam swept past their hiding spot, illuminating Harrison's face for a split second. He tensed, ready to fight, though he had never thrown a punch outside of a boxing gym spar. Then the ground began to vibrate. A low rumble started deep in the earth, growing into a roar. A train was coming. "The express," Audrey whispered. "It doesn't stop." The roar became deafening. The headlights of the train pierced the tunnel, blindingly bright. As the train screamed past, a blur of silver and light, Audrey grabbed Harrison's lapels. "Move, now!" "What?" he yelled over the noise. "Use the noise! Run!" She dragged him out of the alcove, and they sprinted alongside the speeding train. The noise masked their footsteps. The wind from the cars whipped Harrison's hair into his eyes. They ran until their lungs burned, finally reaching an emergency maintenance ladder 1/2 mile down the track. Audrey climbed first, pushing open a heavy grate that led up to a sidewalk grate in a back alley of Hell's Kitchen. They spilled out onto the wet pavement, gasping for air, covered in soot and grease. Harrison collapsed against a dumpster, wiping black grime from his forehead. He looked at his suit, ruined. He checked his pockets for his phone. "I need to call security," he panted, tapping the screen. "I have a private extraction team." "Don't," Audrey said, slapping the phone out of his hand. Hey, that's a $3,000 prototype. It's a tracking device, Audrey snapped. If Arthur Banks has the resources to falsify a government survey and send hitmen into a subway, he has access to your GPS. You turn that on, we're dead in 5 minutes. Harrison stared at the cracked phone on the wet asphalt. He looked at Audrey. Her hair was coming loose from her waitress bun, framing a face that was fierce and terrified all at once. For the first time in his life, Harrison Blackwood felt entirely helpless. His money meant nothing here. His name meant nothing. "So what do we do?" he asked, his voice losing its command. "Check into the Ritz?" "You can't use your credit cards," Audrey said, counting the crumpled bills in her apron pocket. "They'll flag the transaction. You're ghosted, Mr. Blackwood. You don't exist anymore." She looked up at the rain starting to fall. "We go to the one place people like you never look," she said. "Where?" "Queens." The journey was a humiliation for Harrison. They took a crowded bus, squeezed between a man smelling of onions and a teenager blasting music. Harrison tried to make himself small, pulling his collar up, paranoid that every pair of eyes was an assassin. But nobody looked at him. Without the armor of his boardroom, he was just another tired, dirty man on a late-night bus. They got off at a stop in a neighborhood Harrison had only seen on crime dramas. The streetlights flickered. The buildings were brick walk-ups with peeling paint. Audrey led him into a building that smelled of boiled cabbage and floor wax. They walked up 4 flights of stairs. The elevator was out of order, and she unlocked a door with 3 different deadbolts. "Welcome to the penthouse," she muttered, flicking on the light. The apartment was tiny. It was essentially one room with a kitchenette in the corner. Books were everywhere, stacks of them on the floor, on the radiator, lining the walls. Maps covered the windows instead of curtains. Harrison stood in the center of the room, feeling like a giant in a dollhouse. He saw a small cot in the corner, a desk covered in papers, and on the counter, a stark red envelope. He picked it up. Final notice: eviction proceedings. He looked at the date. She had 3 days to vacate. Harrison felt a knot form in his stomach. While he was drinking $1,000 scotch and laughing about a $10 million joke, this girl was counting hours until she was homeless. "You're in trouble," Harrison said softly. Audrey snatched the letter from his hand. "I'm managing." "No, you're not. Why didn't you ask for help? At the restaurant?" "Ask who?" "You?" Audrey let out a bitter laugh, throwing her coat onto the cot. "Mr. Blackwood, the staff are instructed not to make eye contact with you. Last month, you fired a busboy because he poured water from the wrong side. We are invisible to you." Harrison opened his mouth to defend himself, then closed it. She was right. He had been a tyrant, insulated by his wealth, viewing people as assets or liabilities. "I'm sorry," he said. It was the first sincere apology he had given in a decade. Audrey paused, looking at him. She saw the fatigue in his eyes. He wasn't the Wolf of Wall Street right now. He was just a man. "Sit down," she said, her voice softening. "I have a first aid kit. Your knee was bleeding." She made him sit on the only chair, a wobbly wooden thing. She rolled up his pant leg. The cut was nasty, filled with grit from the tunnel. Audrey knelt before him, cleaning the wound with rubbing alcohol and cotton balls. Harrison watched her hands, deft, gentle, capable. "Why are you helping me?" he asked quietly. "After everything I said, you could have left me in the tunnel." Audrey didn't look up. She applied a bandage. "Because my father didn't die in an accident. If that letter is real, he's out there. He's in trouble. And you're the only link I have to finding him." She finished and stood up, walking over to the desk where she had placed the parchment, the document that started it all. She had shoved it into her shirt before running. "We need to translate the rest," she said, her demeanor shifting back to the academic. The warning about the mine was just the surface. There's a second layer of encryption here. The spacing between the glyphs, it's irregular. Harrison limped over to the desk. Irregular how? "Look," she pointed. The standard Chiaro script flows continuously, but here, every third symbol has a microscopic gap. It's a grill cipher. If you lay a specific pattern over it, new words appear. "Do you have the pattern?" "No." Audrey bit her lip. "But my father was a creature of habit. He used to hide keys in his favorite books. He called it leaving breadcrumbs for the birds." She turned to the bookshelf, her eyes scanning the spines. "He sent this to you," she murmured. "He knew you would bring it to a translator. He knew I worked at the Obsidian room. He got me the job before he disappeared, said it was safe. He engineered this whole meeting, Harrison." Harrison felt a chill. "He knew I would offer the money, that I would make a scene?" "He knew you were arrogant," Audrey said matter-of-factly. "He knew you'd show it off." She pulled a thick, leather-bound book from the shelf. Don Quixote. "This was his favorite," she whispered. She opened the book and shook it. Nothing fell out. "It's not there," Harrison said, disappointment crashing down on him. "Wait." Audrey ran her fingers over the inside of the spine. "It's hollow." She grabbed a letter opener and pried the inner binding loose. A small, thin object slid out. It wasn't a paper key. It was a transparency slide, a clear piece of plastic with blacked-out squares. "The grill," Harrison breathed. Audrey's hands trembled as she took the transparency and laid it over the ancient-looking parchment on the desk. She aligned the corners. The chaotic symbols were suddenly masked by the black squares, leaving only a few visible characters. They formed a new sentence. Audrey read it out loud, her voice shaking. "The serpent nests in the tower of glass, but the heart of the wolf is kept in the iron vault. Midnight. Sector 7, bring the blood of the king." Harrison frowned. "Tower of glass. That's Blackwood Tower, my headquarters. And the serpent is Arthur Banks." "But what is the iron vault?" Audrey asked. "And Sector 7? Harrison's face went pale. "Sector 7 isn't a place on a map. It's a storage facility. My father's private storage facility at the docks. He died 10 years ago. Nobody has been inside since." "And blood of the king?" Audrey asked, looking at him. Harrison looked down at his bandaged knee, then back at her. "Biometrics," he realized. "The vault is DNA locked. It needs my blood to open." The realization hung in the air of the cramped apartment like smoke. "Your father's storage unit," Audrey said, pacing the small room. "If the letter is telling us to go there, then whatever proof we need to take down Arthur and find my father is inside." Harrison nodded, his mind racing. "Arthur knows about the mine fraud. But he's desperate. He tried to kill me to cover it up. That means the stakes are higher than just money. If he's willing to murder a CEO in a subway station, he's scared of something bigger." "We have to go to the docks," Audrey said, grabbing her coat. "Wait." Harrison grabbed her wrist gently. "We can't just walk in. The docks are monitored. If Arthur is tracking us, he'll anticipate I might go to my family's properties. We need a distraction." Harrison looked around the apartment. He saw an old laptop on her bed. "Does that work?" "It's slow, but yes." Harrison sat down at the computer. "I can't access my bank accounts, but I have a back door into the building's HVAC control system. I installed it years ago when I was micromanaging the climate control." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to set off the fire alarms in Blackwood Tower," Harrison typed furiously. "Every single one. The building will evacuate. Emergency services will swarm the place. Arthur and his team will be forced to deal with the chaos at the headquarters. It should buy us an hour at the docks." He hit enter. On the screen, a confirmation code flashed green. "Done," Harrison said, a grim satisfaction on his face. Let's see how Arthur likes a 3 a.m. wake-up call. Getting to the docks required another lesson in humility for Harrison. Audrey navigated them through the back streets, avoiding cameras. They stole bicycles, Harrison hesitating before Audrey rolled her eyes, and told him he could buy the owner a new bike shop later, and rode through the mist towards the waterfront. The Sector 7 storage facility was a relic of old New York. It was a massive brick warehouse surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. "There's a guard at the gate," Harrison whispered as they crouched behind a stack of shipping crates. "I'll handle him," Audrey said. "You? You're a linguistic anthropologist. I'm a waitress in a bar where drunk Wall Street guys try to grab me every night," she corrected. "I know how to handle men." She messed up her hair, pulled her shirt slightly off one shoulder to look disheveled, and stumbled out into the open. "Help!" she cried out, her voice pitching up into a perfect panic. "Please, someone help me!" The guard, a bored older man, jumped up from his booth. "Miss, what's wrong?" "My boyfriend," she sobbed, running toward the gate. "He kicked me out of the car. He's chasing me." The guard unlocked the gate, stepping out. "Calm down, miss. Come inside. I'll call the police." As soon as the guard stepped past the threshold, Harrison sprinted from the shadows. He didn't have a weapon, but he had the element of surprise. He tackled the guard, dragging him down. It wasn't graceful. It was a messy grapple. But Harrison managed to get the man in a chokehold until he went limp, unconscious, but alive. "Nice tackle, Wolf," Audrey said, dropping the act instantly. She grabbed the guard's keys. "I played rugby at Yale," Harrison gasped, rubbing his jaw. "I hated it. Glad I didn't quit." They dragged the guard into the booth and bound his hands with zip ties they found in the drawer. Then they ran toward the main warehouse. Unit 7 was at the far end. It was a massive steel door with no keyhole, just a small glass panel with a needle inside. "The blood lock," Harrison said. He hesitated. "If this is a trap, if Arthur is waiting inside—" "We don't have a choice," Audrey said. She stood close to him, her hand finding his. "Do it." Harrison placed his finger into the receptacle. A sharp prick. The machine whirred. Identity confirmed. Harrison Blackwood. With a groan of hydraulic gears, the massive steel door began to slide upward. They ducked under it before it was fully open. Inside, it wasn't a storage unit full of old furniture. It was a command center. Banks of servers hummed along the walls. Maps of South America covered the tables. And in the center of the room, sitting in a wheelchair, hooked up to an IV drip, was a man. Audrey gasped. "Dad?" The man turned slowly. He looked frail, aged 20 years in the last 5. His hair was white, his face gaunt. But the eyes, sharp, intelligent, were the same. "Audrey," Robert Hale rasped. Tears filled his eyes. And the wolf. "Dad!" Audrey ran to him, falling to her knees beside the wheelchair. She buried her face in his hands. "I thought you were dead. Everyone said." "I had to be dead," Robert said, stroking her hair weakly. "To protect you." Harrison approached slowly, looking around the room. "Professor Hale, you built this?" "Your father built this, Harrison," Robert said, looking at the billionaire. "Before he died, we were partners. Not in business, in guardianship." "Guardianship of what?" "The lithium," Robert coughed. "It's not just lithium in that mine in Peru. Beneath the salt flats, there is an aquifer, a massive, prehistoric water source. Pure, untouched. In 50 years it will be worth more than oil. More than gold." Robert pointed to the screens. Arthur Banks found out about it. He doesn't want to mine the lithium. He wants to poison the aquifer. Why? Harrison asked, horrified. To create scarcity, Audrey realized, lifting her head. If he contaminates the natural water supply of the region, he can force the government to buy water from his desalination plants on the coast. He's not building a mine. He's building a monopoly on life. Exactly, Robert said. He kept me alive because I'm the only one who knows the location of the main artery of the aquifer. He's been torturing me for coordinates for 5 years. I gave him false codes, puzzles, hoping someone would find me. The letter, Harrison said. It was a distress signal. Yes, Robert nodded. But we are out of time. Arthur knows I sent it. He's coming, not just with lawyers. He's coming to purge everything. As if on cue, the warehouse lights flickered and died. The hum of the servers stopped. Silence fell over the dark room. Then a voice boomed over the warehouse intercom system. Harrison, Audrey, I see you've found the family reunion. It was Arthur Banks. I must admit, the fire alarm at the tower was a clever distraction. But did you really think I wouldn't have a silent alarm on the vault? You walked right into the cage. Harrison grabbed Audrey and pulled her away from her father, shielding them both. Where are you, Arthur? Come out and face me. I'm not there, Harrison. I'm miles away. But my associates are there, and they have orders to burn the warehouse to the ground, with all 3 of you inside. The sound of heavy bolts locking into place echoed from the main door. Then the smell of gasoline began to seep under the gap. He's going to torch it, Audrey screamed. Dad, we have to move. She grabbed the wheelchair. No, Robert said, locking the wheels. I can't run, Audrey. I'll only slow you down. I am not leaving you. There is a back exit, Robert said rapidly. Behind the server rack. It leads to the drainage outflow. It's tight. Too tight for the chair. You 2 have to go. No, Audrey cried. Harrison looked at the old man. He saw the resolve in Robert's eyes. A father sacrificing himself for his daughter. Harrison grabbed a heavy metal bar from a tool rack. Nobody is dying today, Harrison growled. Professor, unlock the wheels. Audrey, push him. I'm going to make us a door. Harrison, there are armed men outside, Audrey yelled. Good, Harrison said, his eyes cold and focused. I'm tired of running. He walked over to a panel on the wall marked Fire Suppression System. It was an industrial halon gas system designed to suck the oxygen out of the room to stop fires, but if reversed or tampered with, the pressure tanks could be explosive. Get behind the server rack, Harrison shouted. He raised the metal bar and smashed the valve of the main halon tank. A hiss of high-pressure gas screamed into the room. Harrison didn't stop. He grabbed a flare gun from the emergency kit on the wall. Cover your ears! He fired the flare into the cloud of expanding gas. The explosion blew the corrugated steel wall of the warehouse outward, creating a massive hole and sending a shockwave that knocked the hitmen outside off their feet. Go, go, go! Harrison yelled. He grabbed the wheelchair and together with Audrey, they sprinted and rolled through the smoke and debris out into the cool night air of the docks. They were alive. But as the sirens wailed in the distance, Harrison knew the war had just begun. He looked at Audrey, her face streaked with tears and soot, and he knew he would burn down the entire city to keep her safe. But then, a black helicopter rose from the other side of the pier, its searchlight pinning them against the burning wreckage. Arthur Banks wasn't done yet. The helicopter didn't land. It hovered like a giant mechanical dragonfly, the wash from its rotors whipping the sea into a frenzy and drowning out the distant sirens. The spotlight pinned Harrison, Audrey, and Robert against the burning skeleton of the warehouse. "Run!" Harrison yelled, grabbing the handles of the wheelchair. They dove behind a stack of rusted shipping containers just as the pavement where they had been standing erupted in a spray of bullets. "He's not trying to capture us anymore," Harrison shouted over the roar of the engine. "He's erasing the board." They navigated the maze of the container yard. It was a labyrinth of steel canyons. Harrison pushed the wheelchair with a strength he didn't know he possessed, his Italian suit torn, his lungs burning. Audrey ran ahead, scouting the corners, her waitress instincts for navigating crowded spaces now repurposed for survival. "Dead end!" she screamed, skidding to a halt. They were trapped in a cul-de-sac of stacked crates. The only way out was back the way they came, straight into the line of fire. The helicopter dipped lower. Through the glass cockpit, they could see a figure in the passenger seat. Arthur Banks. He was wearing a headset, looking down at them like ants in a jar. He gestured to the gunman beside him. "This is it," Robert Hale said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, ruggedized flash drive. "Audrey, take this." "Dad, no." "The encryption key for the aquifer data is on here. If I die, the secret dies with me. But if you have this, you can expose him." Robert tried to unlock the brakes on his chair. "I'm going to wheel out there. I'll draw their fire. You two run for the water." "Absolutely not," Harrison roared. He shoved the wheelchair behind a heavy steel beam. "Nobody sacrifices themselves on my watch. I'm the CEO. I make the strategy." Harrison looked up at the towering crane above them. It was an old gantry crane, its operator cab dark, its hook dangling 50 feet above the ground, swaying in the wind. "Audrey," Harrison said, his eyes locking onto hers. "Can you operate a heavy load winch?" I drove a forklift at a summer job once," she stammered. "Close enough. Climb the ladder. Get in the cab. Drop the hook." "On what?" "On the helicopter," Harrison said grimly. "You're crazy. He's hovering low to get a clear shot. He's arrogant. Go!" Audrey didn't argue. She scrambled up the rusted maintenance ladder, hand over hand, disappearing into the darkness of the crane's structure. Harrison stepped out from behind the container, his hands raised in surrender. The spotlight swung onto him. The helicopter banked, turning its nose toward him. Arthur Banks leaned out, his voice amplified by a loudspeaker system. "Smart move, Harrison. Where is the girl? Where is the old man?" "Gone!" Harrison yelled, walking slowly into the open space of the dock. They swam for it. "It's just me, Arthur. You want the company? Take it. You want the mine? It's yours. Just let me walk away." Arthur laughed, a distorted sound over the speakers. "You don't get to walk away, Harrison. You're a loose end." The helicopter hovered lower, just 40 feet above the ground, steadying for the kill shot. Harrison stood his ground, staring down the barrel of a rifle, sweat stinging his eyes. He wasn't looking at the gun. He was looking past the helicopter, up at the crane. "Come on, Audrey," he thought. Read the controls. High above, inside the dusty cab, Audrey was frantically pulling levers. The control panel was ancient, the labels worn off. She grabbed a joystick that looked like the hydraulic release. "Please," she whispered. "Work." She slammed the lever forward. With a groan of stressing metal, the massive steel hook, weighing 2 tons, released its brake. It plummeted from the sky like a meteor. It didn't hit the helicopter directly. It smashed into the tail boom with the force of a freight train. The sound was sickening, shredding metal and shattering glass. The helicopter spun violently, the tail rotor disintegrating. The pilot screamed, fighting the controls, but physics was unforgiving. The chopper spiraled down, crashing hard onto the top of a stack of shipping containers 20 yards away. The impact shook the ground. Rotors shattered, sending shrapnel flying. Harrison threw himself to the pavement as a piece of the blade sliced through the air where his head had been. Silence returned to the docks, broken only by the crackle of flames and the distant wail of approaching police sirens. Harrison stood up, dusting off his knees. He looked up at the crane cab. Audrey was leaning out, waving, her face pale but triumphant. He ran to the base of the ladder as she climbed down. She jumped the last few feet into his arms. He caught her, holding her tight, burying his face in her neck. "You did it," he breathed. "You crazy, brilliant waitress. You did it." "I think I'm asking for a raise," she sobbed, laughing hysterically. They pulled apart as the sound of coughing came from the wreckage of the helicopter. Harrison's face hardened. He walked over to the containers. Arthur Banks had crawled out of the twisted fuselage. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his suit ruined, dragging a broken leg behind him. He looked up to see Harrison standing over him. "It's over, Arthur," Harrison said coldly. You can't prove anything," Arthur wheezed, clutching his side. "I'll bury you in litigation. I own the judges. I own the press." "You owned the old Harrison," the billionaire said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, the one with the cracked screen. "But you forgot something. My phone was recording to the cloud, the entire conversation in the warehouse, the order to kill us, the confession about the aquifer. It's already in the inbox of the FBI, the SEC, and the New York Times." Arthur Banks slumped back against the cold steel, defeated. Blue and red lights flooded the pier. SWAT teams swarmed the area. Paramedics rushed toward Robert Hale, who was waving them over from his wheelchair. As the police cuffed Arthur Banks, Harrison turned to Audrey. She looked exhausted, covered in grease and soot, her uniform in tatters. To him, she looked like a queen. "So," Harrison said, "about that $10 million. Audrey shook her head, smiling tiredly. "I told you, I don't want it." "Good," Harrison said, "because I have a better offer." The boardroom of Blackwood Enterprises was usually a place of hushed whispers and terrified silence. Today it was a circus. Reporters were jammed into the back of the room. Cameras flashed incessantly. The remaining board members sat nervously, waiting. The double doors opened. Harrison Blackwood walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a black turtleneck. His arm was in a sling, a reminder of the night on the docks. But the biggest shock wasn't his attire. It was the woman walking beside him. Audrey Hale wore a sharp navy blazer, her hair down, her head held high. She carried a tablet, not a serving tray. Harrison stood at the head of the table. He didn't sit. "For 10 years, Harrison began, his voice projected clearly without a microphone. "This company has operated on a philosophy of profit at any cost. We didn't look at who we hurt. We didn't listen to the voices of the people we impacted." He looked at the camera lenses. "That ends today. Arthur Banks is currently awaiting trial for fraud, attempted murder, and ecological terrorism. But he didn't act alone. He acted within a culture that I allowed to fester." Harrison gestured to the screen behind him. A map of the Peruvian Andes appeared. "The lithium project is cancelled," Harrison announced. Gasps filled the room. "But the stock price!" one board member shouted. "Instead," Harrison continued, ignoring the outburst, "Blackwood Enterprises is partnering with the Hale Foundation, a new NGO dedicated to preserving indigenous water rights. We are donating the land back to the Cuero people, and we are funding the construction of sustainable water infrastructure designed by the locals, for the locals." He turned to Audrey. "I'd like to introduce the director of the Hale Foundation," Harrison said, "and the new chief linguistic officer of Blackwood Enterprises, Ms. Audrey Hale." Audrey stepped up to the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces, the same people who would have snapped their fingers at her for a refill 3 weeks ago. "Language," Audrey said, her voice steady and commanding, "is about understanding. It's about listening to what isn't being said. You looked at a contract and saw profit. I looked at it and saw a warning. Going forward, this company will learn to read between the lines." The press conference ended in a roar of questions, but Harrison and Audrey didn't stay. They walked out the side door, leaving the chaos behind. Later that evening, the elevator to the 55th floor dinged softly. The obsidian room was closed for a private event. The lights were dimmed. The city of New York sprawled out below them, a carpet of diamonds. Harrison walked to the corner table, the same table where he had thrown the parchment. It was set for dinner. Audrey walked over to the window, looking at the reflection of the room. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had stood in the shadows, invisible. "How is your father?" Harrison asked, coming up beside her. "He's good," Audrey smiled. "The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. He's already lecturing the nurses on Quechua grammar. He likes you, you know. He says for a capitalist vulture, you have a decent heart." "High praise," Harrison laughed. He poured 2 glasses of water, not scotch. He handed one to her. "You know," Harrison said, leaning against the glass, "I realized something. You never translated the very last line of that document." Audrey looked at him, surprised. "There wasn't a last line. I read it all." "No." Harrison reached into his jacket. He pulled out the original parchment, now battered and stained. There was a tiny inscription on the back. "I had your father translate it for me while you were getting checked out at the hospital." "What does it say?" Audrey asked. Harrison cleared his throat. He looked nervous. The King of Wall Street, who had stared down a helicopter gunship, was blushing. "It's an old proverb," Harrison said. "He who listens to the whisper will hear the truth. He who holds the hand of the wise will find his home." He took a step closer to her. "I was deaf for a long time, Audrey. I was shouting so loud I couldn't hear anything. You silenced me. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Audrey looked down at the water glass in her hand, then up at his ice-blue eyes. The barrier between them, the tray, the uniform, the millions of dollars, was gone. "I'm still not taking the 10 million, she whispered, a playful smile touching her lips. "I know." Harrison smiled, taking the glass from her hand and setting it on the table. He took her hands in his. "That's why I'm not offering money. I'm offering dinner. And maybe, if you're not too busy running a foundation, a second date." "Was the subway chase the first date?" "I bought you a bus ticket," Harrison shrugged. "I'm a big spender." Audrey laughed, the sound bright and free. She stepped closer, closing the gap between them. "Okay," she said softly, "but this time nobody orders for me." "Deal," Harrison whispered. He leaned in, and this time there were no secrets, no codes, and no lies. Just a kiss, high above the city, between a man who had everything and the woman who had shown him what everything was actually worth. The check for $10 million still sat in Harrison's safe, uncashed. But as he held Audrey Hale in his arms, he knew he was the richest man in the world. And that is the story of how a shy waitress brought down a corrupt empire and tamed the Wolf of Wall Street. It just goes to show that true value isn't found in bank accounts or stock options, but in intelligence, courage, and the willingness to stand up for the truth. Harrison thought he could buy the answer with $10 million, but Audrey taught him that some things, like trust and love, are priceless. If you enjoyed this story of twists, betrayal, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. What did you think of Audrey's decision to turn down the money? Would you have taken the check? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.